I wanted to learn more about you and your creative nature, because it's something that I'm embarking on myself, because I feel like I've let society get in the way, or my own space get in the way, or my own thoughts or my own fears get in the way of me being tapping into my creative side. And I've found that after being in business for almost 20 years, that I'm now like, I've just pounded through numbers and spreadsheets and spines and stuff, and it's like, all right, what's next? And I know that I'm missing a part, or want to tap back into a part of myself that I let go a long time ago. And I admire that in you and your creativity. So I was like, I want to learn more about that. And I also want to learn more about interviewing people and doing podcasts. And I figured this was a good medium. And even if it never airs, it's still something powerful.
Yeah.
Cool. Are we recording?
We're on.
Oh, we are.
We're on.
Do you want to do the welcome, or
I'll do that later.
Okay.
No, this is yours.
We
you do this.
All right, great. So that's my piece. But enough about me. Let's talk about me.
That's your piece.
Okay. So I first I want to thank you for putting this together, being always willing to work with me, and also teach and provide this opportunity for us to sit and talk, and for me to learn about you. So I want to start out because I think it's important for your listeners. They may not know who you are. They may just pick you up on the internet, or they may have done business with you in the past. So I want to know about your history. Like, how did you get here? Like, how are we sitting on this couch? In 3 words or less.
Yeah, right. Like from the beginning?
Well, you could.
I'm from DC.
Okay.
Born and raised. But from the earliest age, I knew what I wanted to do.
Tell me a little more about that. Like, give me an instance. Like, what's an experience that you had as a kid? I'm assuming. How early?
You had mentioned being creative. I don't know if it's something that you can learn. I mean, I think you can learn. You can learn techniques and how to improve yourself. I've just always had that in me. Not to sound like, from a very early age. So I was born in 1972. Star Wars came out in 1977. So I can date it that way. So that's 5. Did I do the math there right?
That's 72, 5. 77, 5. Yeah.
I'm pretty good at that.
I didn't think there would be math at this point of my life. Yeah.
I did. My daughter, Sadie, handed me over homework 2 nights ago, and it was fractions, like basic.
Yeah.
And I looked at it. I'm like, Sadie, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I can't. I need to go. I have to book an appointment with her teacher just to have her show me how to teach her.
So then you can teach your kids.
That's embarrassing.
Yeah, I've been there, brother. It's okay.
So I say that Star Wars thing because at 5, I locked myself in my room for days listening to the Star Wars movie soundtrack on LP, on a record. I had like a kid's record player. So I kind of indoctrinated myself into music and creativity, and I would visualize, the movie, and I would just sit there and listen to the melodies and stuff. So my grandparents lived, I don't know, a mile and a half away from us. My grandfather owned an estate. I say estate. He owned, as the years went on, he owned about 80 acres in PG County, Maryland. Had horses and stuff like that. By the time I came around, it whittled down to, he sold it off to developers and stuff. So he had maybe 10, 12 acres at the time, but all the stables were there and all that. But my mom, he owned an electrical company, and my mom was his bookkeeper, primarily so she would be able to raise me for those first 5 years and not have to go anywhere. So, and I had 2 older sisters, but they had a piano. And I would basically hang out when she was doing the bookkeeping, hang out with my grandmother, and she was watching Wheel of Fortune, and she had a Betamax recorder, so she would watch, all the, like, Entertainment Tonight, I think, was on, but all those kind of like Merv Griffin shows and stuff like that. So I would just get on the piano and start picking out melodies of the show themes and the thinking music and stuff like that. So by the age of 5,
that one, right?
I learned, the first thing I learned was The Saints Come Marching In. Okay. So by 5, I taught myself how to play the piano just by sitting there and annoying her, which to her credit, she let me do. So I say that I always had parents and grandparents and people around me, even teachers, support that creativity and supported me kind of going off mentally where I needed to go. Unfortunately, when I was in class and other things, because I was always somewhere else rather than where I was supposed to be. So that's where it all started. But around, we grew up, I think we're around the same age. We grew up in an era of VHS players.
Yep.
So I would get 2 VHS players and then make my own music videos because MTV was huge by the mid 80s. So I would make my own videos off of that. And from an early age, before I was 10, I knew what I wanted to do, which was produce.
Did someone get you a video camera and you just said, here, go?
No, we never did that because that was still very expensive at the time, like one of those ginormous
shoulder,
things. Yeah.
How'd you make music videos at that age?
I would record the footage off of MTV from various videos and then just, cut everything together.
Cut and paste. Early editing.
It was early editing.
Yeah.
But if I go back a second, what I really wanted to be was a music producer. That was really what I wanted to be. But I don't know how, but at 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, I had the thought of, well, I want to engineer at Van Halen's album. But there's only probably a handful of engineers. Like I was getting the guitar magazines and stuff back then. I'm probably not going to be able to do that because there are already guys doing that, and there's like 5 of them in the world that are really good, and I'm probably not. That's probably the odds are against me. So why don't I do video, because I love that, and then there's audio.
So you're already starting to think of your career at 10 years old?
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
I have no idea.
Were your parents entrepreneurs or?
No. My mom was my grandfather's bookkeeper. She ended up doing that until he got rid of the business. And my dad was an installer / engineer because he for Western Electric, AT&T, the Big Bell, Mama Bell. Was it Mama Bell? The Bell systems, phone systems. So he would, I think an engineer, but mostly installer of all that kind of equipment. So the phone equipment that we use, I think universally in this country now, which he'll be proud of me, a 5E system. He installed all that, the first wave of all that stuff.
Wow.
So, and then when 9/11 happened, he was reinstalling that section of 9/11. So where the plane hit, if that's what you believe happened, if the plane hit...
I'm leaving that out of this conversation.
So I've watched too many documentaries. Yeah. They had just rebuilt that section of the Pentagon. Well, his job ended the 2 days before 9/11 was on a Monday. His job ended that Saturday at the Pentagon, and they redid all of the phone systems for the Pentagon and all that stuff. So that's what he did.
Okay.
And then he had 2 daughters and myself at the time, and we all went to private school. So he worked 2 jobs. So he had an additional job at the time at the auto parts counter at Montgomery Ward's.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so going from, go ahead.
But thinking about creativity, he passed away a number of years ago, but he would always laugh and bring up constantly. I used to call him all the time at work and pretend I was somebody else. So I would be like, Montgomery Ward's, I'm like, hey, I got a Ford Mustang, and I got my wheel fell off. Can you help me out? I need a part.
Was he able to call it out quickly? Or
he would know right away. Of course it was me, but he would play along with it. But I always had that, I always wanted to create. I wasn't an actor.
You also still have that joking side to you, or that slightly dry sense of humor that I appreciate. Yeah. All right, so fast forward from 10 years old when you already knew you wanted to create an empire of creativity, and then what'd you do? Like, what did you study in college, and then?
So I went to University of Maryland. At the time, they had a film school. Like a radio, television, and film, kind of like film school, media school. And I remember the day I signed up with the counselor there. I signed up and registered and all that for my class, registered for the program, got accepted. And then they told me literally, welcome to RTVF, but we just closed the program.
Oh, jeez.
So you're grandfathered in, but instead of doing all your English 101 classes and stuff like that, you have to do all of your major classes first. So I did college backwards. And then, unfortunately, before I probably I was going to another school, but my parents separated. So all the monies tied up for school were now tied up in all that. So I put myself through college. So I ended up choosing to go there. It was local. I wanted to go somewhere else. Couldn't now. So
So how'd you do that?
put myself through school.
Yeah.
In life, oftentimes you're presented with swim or die, sink or swim situations, and that's just what you do. And I wasn't even sure I wanted to go to college. I actually didn't want to go to college, but I felt like it was something that I had to do, and I would learn something out of it. I was a guest professor at Princeton a number of years ago at their film department.
You and Tim Ferriss?
Yeah. And the professor asked me to tell, it was a summer camp. So they weren't college students, they were younger students that were going to camp there. And the professor, one of the kids asked me, would you recommend going to college? And I didn't hesitate, not on purpose, but I just said no. And he's like, why? And I said, as an employer, I'm never, as an employer of a media company, I'm never going to ask you for your resume. Like, I'm never going to ask you if you graduated. I just want to know if you can do X, Y, Z, if you know how to use a camera, if you know how to edit. I'm going to give you a camera to take a picture because I want to see what your eye sees. Or if you can't do any of those, I want to know that you're willing to learn how to do those.
Actually, I want to put a pin in that because I do want to ask you about like what you look for in employees or how you actually interview people. So we get back to college, and then fast forward after college, did you go work for someone?
I had internships.
Okay.
For film companies. Ones that were working. I originally, when I got out of college, went to. I was working for Los Angeles production companies that instead of sending crews out this way to DC, they would hire local crews. So I worked for them for a year maybe, and then I was interning or working for other film studio companies here. And at the time, there were a lot of bigger studios here.
Now, when you say
DC.
intern, is that a free intern, or because nowadays interns get paid?
It was a little bit of both, if I remember correctly, mostly free. And then I found an editing job.
You put the sweat in.
So that's well, I'm sure we'll get into this, but I've had every imaginable job within this industry. So when people come to me or whatever, when people come to me to either work here and just associating on the set with other people, I know the BS. You know what I mean? Like I know every facet and nuance of most of the jobs, or if not every job in the business. And the millennials get a bad rap, and some of it's true. They want to jump in
and be
a director,
executive vice president.
Yeah, but they don't realize you got to be a cameraman. I mean, you got to do all the smaller things first, because when you're a director, you need to know what that guy does and how to talk to that guy and how to convey your direction to that guy. And if you know how he does his business, you're going to be able to convey that message more effectively.
So as a director, what level have you taken it to? And then I'm going to go back to education and your business. So have you directed movies, TV shows? I know you've done little spots.
I cut my teeth in the business in cutting TV commercials, locally, regionally, and then nationally. And then I was managing a Fortune 500 media company. They had a regional production unit in DC. So I was managing that for a number of years. And then somewhere around 2000, I was constantly having these ideas of shows that I wanted to do. So I started the Blue Wave in 1999, really as an umbrella to pay for, all these ideas that I wanted to do aside from my regular gig, which was managing businesses or managing production department for another business. And then the first show that I developed got a verbal with a TV network. So it was kind of it felt like early success right away. And then when I went in to sign the contract, everything was changed. And then that was my introduction to the TV business, is that's how it works.
Yeah.
So I pulled the deal off the table. I got really soured about it. And then I didn't really do anything with the Blue Wave for a year or so because of that. But then I had another idea. So I wanted to do an independent film. And I got into that. But one story that you had asked, how did you pay for school, or how did you get through school?
Yeah.
I have this philosophy of just why not? Or why can't I? Like, why can't I go through school? Why can't I pay for it myself? So I found jobs that I liked. I worked on boats as a first mate and a deckhand in Old Town, Virginia. I did that for 3 summers, I think. And then, I mean, I had every job. I worked at a Gap, which was just, I hated it. I hated it.
Folding clothes is no fun.
Oh my gosh. And then my godmother worked at ran a Hallmark store for, years, as long as I ever knew her. And she told me I could work there. And I did that one day. And I was just like, I'm sorry, I can't come back. This is miserable. Like, I don't know if it was, I just felt like I was emasculated. I don't know what it was, but I didn't feel like a dude there.
Yeah.
And I just didn't feel like myself there. And
were you handing out the gold stickers at the counter?
I was surrounded by precious moments and just cards and
stuffed animals,
fluffy tie animals. And so it just drove me nuts. Ironically, that's the world I live in now with my kids.
Yes.
I had to buy these things all the time.
And they're how old?
Right now, this year they'll be 9 and 6.
Boys, girls?
9-year-old's a girl, 6-year-old's a boy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you got both. You got both, the joy of both.
I do.
On a daily basis.
It's a joy.
Yes.
No, it really is.
Best lesson, best gift, best lesson, right?
Yeah. So I put myself through school. I was not the greatest student in the world.
You just kept us on point. That was good.
Yeah.
You're the podcaster.
I was not a good student.
I'm gathering that from...
By any means. I hated being there. I just felt like I had to do it. And quite honestly, a lot of it was I did it for my mom. You know, she went to Maryland, graduated from Maryland.
Bookkeeper.
She wanted to be an educator. And maybe this tied into the way I looked at life. My grandmother did not want her to be an educator. I don't know if she thought it was beneath her, but she just wanted... I don't know. I think in my grandmother's world back then, we're talking probably what are we talking? I don't know, mid-century last year, 50s maybe?
Yeah, 1950s. For
so
those listeners who...
She caved in and became, I think, like business, major or something like that. So I remember thinking about that going, I never want to be told what to do. I wanted to follow my dreams. I have dreams, and I watched her not follow her dreams, and I could see that she regretted that. And she told me later on. But so I put myself through school. I got out of school, and what really changed my direction and really pounded that philosophy in my head was a chance conversation with a neighbor who, when asking him, hey, what did you do this weekend? Or what are you going to do this weekend? He goes, I'm going to the Trisha Yearwood concert. And this is like the summer after I graduated college in 1995. And my thought was, why are you going to a Trisha Yearwood concert?
I have no idea who that is.
It's a country artist, I think.
Right.
And he goes, oh, I'm in the fan club. I get to go backstage. And again, I thought, why do you want to go backstage? And we were like, 21, 22.
Yeah, you're looking at Van Halen still.
Well, I sat there and I thought, well, wait a minute. You're going backstage to concerts. I want to go backstage. I want to meet my heroes. I mean, if that's your hero, great. But I want to meet my heroes. So I went home and I pulled up an album cover or picked up an album, flipped it over, and then realized, okay, I already knew, but all right, it's Warner Brothers that reps Van Halen. I wanted to meet Eddie Van Halen. I had played piano since I was 5. I took a year of guitar lessons at 12 and then dropped those and just started,
going on your own.
Going on it, And so I've been a guitarist for I don't know how many years now, since I was 12. So, they had a New York office, New York phone on the actual album. So I called and I said, hey, I'm doing an article for the paper here in Maryland.
Was that the truth?
That was not the truth.
All right, cool.
Can I get a press pass? Can I get backstage passes? Can I get an interview with the band? And she goes, yeah, just send me a letterhead. Now, this is the world of computers weren't really out yet. I mean, they were, but
they weren't accessible.
They weren't
to us.
accessible.
Yeah,
so we had word processors. So there was no way to Photoshop anything. You know, I couldn't fake it. So I went to University of Maryland. It's the only thing I can think of. And I went to the Diamondback school paper, and I had never set foot in that place before. And as I walked in, there was a stack of letterhead by the door, like on this kind of like railing thing. And I took note of that, and I went to talk to the editor, and I said, hey, my name's Tom. I'm writing an article for Warner Brothers. Do you want it? And he said, absolutely. So I said, okay. Shook his hand, walked out the door, and grabbed a stack of letterhead, put it in my bag, and split town. And then
that's awesome.
All those things happen.
Right on. And
it was trippy, being in that world, meeting your heroes, and then just kind of Eddie hit on my girlfriend at the time, and which I actually took honor in.
That's
pride
great.
In. But that started every time they would come into town, I would get a phone call from the tour manager. Said, hey, you want to take pictures? You want to?
And
do
so
this?
did you take the pictures and write an article for?
I never did anything with it.
Oh, you just hung out with them?
I just hung out with them, had the pictures for myself.
Where are they?
They're over there.
Right.
I'll pull them out. There's all the backstage passes right there.
That's awesome.
So I later did something with them later, but in that moment, I just wanted to meet the guys. So other bands, I started doing it with other bands. And it just got to
be... And this was just for you to experience?
Yeah, just for me to network, to meet my heroes, to see how they did
What other bands?
Mighty Boss Stones, did it with Van Halen, and then I did it with a ton of like festivals and stuff.
Did you actually interview them?
Oh, yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
With this kind of setup, or was it more like video camera pictures?
No, back then it was one of those little micro cassette recorders, which ironically I still have.
Wow.
Yeah, and I have the tapes, the little
and so those never turned into anything.
Those never turned into anything.
You need the unpublished Blue Wave Diaries.
Maybe I'll do those. Yeah. I didn't think about that.
That's awesome. That would be really cool. Because I think, as we talk into this, now we can kind of transition into, because I look at this podcast, Making Waves, as you've obviously made waves in your career and your life, and you've impacted other people like myself and how I met you. Yeah. So talking to your audience out there, younger people who want to make waves, like how do you, let me think. How, like taking that whole experience, like how can you teach that to somebody else? Like what are the things that you got out of that? Let's put it this way.
I have found that it's very similar to walking a horse to water. You can walk them to that water. Whether they drink it is up to them, and oftentimes they don't. And that's why I kind of said, I'm not sure if you can teach yourself to be creative. Or just have it in you, and then it just blossoms. And even if it's that much, you can blossom it into anything. But I learned early on, and this is what I tell people, is that if you want something, no one's going to come knock on your door and give it to you. If you want a date, you have to leave your house, to get that date and meet people and talk to people. If you want to fulfill your dream, whether that is be the best car salesman in the world, or to be the best guitar player, or to be whatever it is that you want to be, you have to leave the house and work at it and work at it and work at it. Or I think, but more importantly, you have to have the desire and the willingness to jump and to follow it first. And it starts with that phone call. Later on, as the years went on, I early picked up that part of show business is you might have spent what you thought was the greatest 6 hours of your life with these guys. They don't know your name after they leave.
Right.
So every time you almost have to, and eventually it catches up. But, 10 years after that, no, not quite, but around that time, the first thing I started doing in the Blue Wave again after that TV show, about a year after we had a verbal on the TV show that I pulled off the table, I just had this idea of a short film that I wanted to do. And Sammy Hagar of Van Halen, former singer of Van Halen, had a tequila company that was just taking over the world at the time, Cabo Wabo Tequila.
I've been there and I've drank it.
Yeah. And the whole movie was about, and again, there is no time clock. If you really love what you do, there is no time clock. You're always working. So I was out having drinks with friends. We were all complaining about the meetings that we had earlier that day. The bartender literally came over, which was a friend of ours, the brewmaster, and said, you guys are in a meeting now.
Yeah.
Like, you're in a meeting now, but you love this one. What's different? And I'm like, oh, we're drinking in this one. He's like, yeah, do it at work. And then I thought, oh, that's a movie. So I wrote this script about that very thing. 4 guys hated their meetings. They loved having meetings at the bar. And the next day, after this revelation by the bartender, they went in and drank all day. And then it became like a Seinfeld thing of what happened to each of those 4 people. I was driving home from that meeting, and Sammy Hagar just came out
after drinking.
After drinking, I like to call them meetings,
Yeah.
Especially when I write off the meeting.
Yes.
I was driving home from that meeting, and I was listening to a Sammy Hagar new CD, and there was this song. I think it was the last song on the album, and it just hit me. And I'm like, I want that song for the movie. And I thought, all right, well, the back door is he has the tequila company. I don't know if he would recall working with me or not. So let me reach out to the tequila company, see if they want to do product placement. So I went online, went to the website, found out the contact number, called them. It ended up being his basically his right-hand man at the time, business manager of the tequila company. And I called him. And again, just like that last thing, why not? Why can't this happen? So his name was Barry. And I said, hey, Barry, I'm Tom, filmmaker, blah, blah, blah. This is my company. Have this idea for a movie. We're going into production. I would love to have Cabo Wabo as the preferred choice of these guys when they go to drink the next day. And he's like, yeah, it sounds great. Sam's coming into the office in an hour, 45 minutes. I'll ask him. I said, you're going to talk to him? He goes, yeah. I said, well, tell him I used to take pictures of him in DC, but also ask him while you're at it if I can have Make It All Right for the end credits. He calls me back in an hour and goes, all right, you're all set. Someone's going to be calling you about the music publishing, and I need your address for all the
That's awesome.
the alcohol. So a couple weeks later, I mean, cases and cases and cases and cases of tequila. But then later that afternoon, a gentleman, Tom Consolo, called me, which is now his manager, I believe, all these years later. And he goes, listen, I don't know what you did. I don't know what you said, but Sam never does this. Like, he's not asking anything for your use of the song. If you take it out of festivals and sell it, just give me a call. Just do me that, and that way we'll renegotiate something. But if this is just for film festivals, I don't want to bring lawyers involved because that's a cost that we're going to have to incur. I'm going to write the contract on a napkin, fax it over to you, and then sign it back.
That's awesome.
And that's what we did.
And where did the movie play?
We had a couple festivals or premieres. And that's the other thing. We sat there, and a buddy of mine was the executive producer for Elliot in the Morning here in D.C. He's syndicated several other places. But we shot most of the movie in DC 101 offices. And then we got them to actually throw our premiere party. And we had bands playing that we got before the movie. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to have all these people here, why don't we do some good with it? So we ended up doing a silent auction with a bunch of charities and stuff in town. And we had everything from a car giveaway to the Guitar Center ponied up some guitars. And we had a lot of really good stuff that we gave back.
Awesome.
To a couple charities in town. So I say all that not to pat myself on the back, but that's been my process of, well, why can't I do that? Let me dream big, because I don't dream small. What's the point of dreaming small? I dream big just naturally and think, all right, well, why can't I have that? Why can't I have him do this for my movie? Or why,
how does the product placement thing work? That's an extreme interest of mine, because I like to.
For me, I did not do it the correct way, but I knew that going in. Generally, you would actually charge them money,
right,
as
to put their
sponsorship,
product in it.
But I want that product. I could have used anything.
Yeah,
I wanted the song, so I basically knew that I would be paying thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for that song. Let me give them something, which is this free advertising for their tequila brand that was getting off the ground and really doing well. And my back door was, well, since I'm giving you that, can I have the song? And that's what ended up
And they were
happening.
cool with that.
Yeah.
They were cool with it on a napkin. So that's
Yeah,
a
cool
lesson
with it on a
right
napkin.
there.
Yeah.
So you can buy in business.
Yeah.
giving away something to get something, but with fair exchange and intention.
Yeah, it's all about serving, is what I've learned later. And I struggled with that for a while because I did not that anything that we do is patented. It's all just creative ideas. But there's been certain products that we have created, and I wrestled with, do I want to talk about that? Do I even want to put that on my website? Because I don't want people stealing that idea, because none of it's proprietary. I can't buy a patent for, a video brochure.
Right.
But then I realized...
A video what?
A video brochure.
A brochure. Okay.
But you know what? What I've learned is that I call it the Tony Robbins model. When Tony started, he didn't get a degree in self-help, He started just helping people and started putting out these audio discs at the time, I think, and maybe VHS tapes, I don't know. And the more and more people saw it, the more and more people deemed him to be the expert and put that label on him. But he had to give away a lot of stuff for free. He was talking to a lot of people for free.
Yeah.
He wasn't getting paid a lot for
or just losing money too.
He was losing money.
Yeah.
And booking these things, these venues, hoping that people would come, or pressing his own. Back in the day, you had to press your own CDs and hope that people were going to buy them. You had this inventory in a warehouse somewhere of, millions of thousands and potentially millions of product, whether it was tape or audio tape or CD. So the point of that story is, if you provide someone a service or provide someone with information, the more that you do that, they bestow on you that title of expert in whatever it is that you're offering them. And that, to me, is more important than getting the quick sale that is not going to come back, potentially not come back. You've invested in that company, so you're not a supplier of a good. You're a partner with that company at that point.
Service,
yeah, or whatever that service is. Whether you are a health provider, like a fitness instructor, personal trainer, and that doesn't necessarily mean you need to give free. Anything, but if they call you after hours and say, "Oh, I'm really struggling with this," what answer that question. Don't say, "Hey, come back tomorrow when you're paying me X amount of dollars an hour, and I'll tell you then." Just talk to them about it.
So it's that level of service. We apply that in our company as well, and I like to equate it to giving something special, but it's not. When you provide something special for someone beyond. Beyond the basics of communication, of listening and having an agreement with someone and understanding someone's name and eye contact, but really, I like the term speed kills because I'm a former athlete, and I think in business it applies every single day, that just getting back to someone. But again, it goes much deeper into that intention of serving, not necessarily speed, but that's just one tactic that I use.
I will say that took me a long time to figure out. And I made many mistakes and lost many customers because I was just going after when you start, and even later, I found the hard way, when you don't provide that extra service, it doesn't end well.
Yeah,
necessarily. So that wasn't,
So what is it about that level of self-awareness or that transformation that you've gone through that allowed you to now say, all right, I got to give this, and it doesn't become a frustration? It doesn't become like, oh, I got to do this again. It's because I've evolved to that space as well, but I want to hear from you. Like, how did you get to the space where you can say, you know what, all right, let's get on the phone. I'll do the extra work. Because you've provided that to me as a customer.
Yeah.
Is that too broad of a question?
Let me start off with, I'm an emotional guy,
which is really why I want to do this interview, because you are an emotional guy.
I like to feel.
Yes.
And I was thinking about this the other day. I'm not diminishing this issue by any means, but the cutters, where they cut their skin.
Yes. Yeah.
Never been a cutter. But it dawned on me the other day, thinking about this podcast, actually, I'm an emotional cutter, I want to feel. And it's like that.
Give me an example. Like, how do you emotionally? Do you cut yourself or cut other people?
No. I try not to. I try not to cut other people. I'm sure I have.
Well, you've ruined those relationships already.
Yeah. No, but even when when you're young and you have your first girlfriend or any girlfriend, or boyfriend or whatever. When that ends, what do you do? Like, what do most people do?
Sit in the bed and cry.
Yeah, but then also oftentimes, at least what I did, but they just went to their radio, right? And they just drown.
Wait, you can see where I'm coming from, or now where you go.
They drown into this music, and they just wanted to, just almost like fall into a pit. Now, at the time, I thought that pit was, I just want to feel this. I don't know if I'm ever getting that back, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. At least I'm feeling something, kind of thing. There's that, I call it a Johnny Cash song, but he did the cover of it. Was it 9 Inch Nails?
Yeah, Hurt. Yeah, I love that song.
I forgot that line, but it's I cut myself just so I could feel. Mm-hmm. And emotionally,
was that the actual line?
I think that's. Yes, that's what it was.
All right, well,
someone will comment on it and tell me how wrong I am. But
that's all right.
Just get in line.
Yes.
That's how I am emotionally. I like to go back and revisit things in my brain, and or sit there and just dwell into that pit oftentimes. Or if I'm doing really well and I feel great about something, I like to relive that kind of thing. So I call it emotionally cutting.
So from the positive and the negative perspective,
it tends to be more negative.
We
of
revisit
course.
the negative over and over. Now,
and then nowadays with the way social media is for people, I can imagine emotional cutters out there. Their big vice is going back and looking at people's Instagram posts.
Yes.
And especially if they broke up with them, going back and seeing what their life is like and all that kind of stuff.
It's time to cut the leash, people.
Yeah.
Just let it go. Move on.
I was reading this book, which I talked about in my kind of like, I call it the reboot podcast, after the whole cancer thing. I was reading this book by, it's a pastor in California, Erwin McManus, and he wrote this book, The Last Arrow. And a good part of the book is about just burning your past. You have to burn your past because if you still are living, it's the whole thing. If you're still living in your past, you cannot move into your future. So I realized, I can't be that emotional cutter anymore. And how do you get over it? You just have to get over it. I found that there was no sense of, listen, it ruined marriage for me. It ruined a lot of things. When my parents decided to, literally overnight, he came home one night, they got into a big fight, then that night they separated, and the next day he moved out. It caught us all off guard. And then you have conversations with your father that you never in a million years thought you would ever have.
How old were you?
17.
So you were relatively conscious.
Yeah. So I didn't talk to him for 12 years. And there were a couple moments in those 12 years where he would try to, we would have a lunch, and then I could see that things weren't going. I was feeling I was being manipulated, and then I just got up and left. So that happened a few times. I will say this before I move on, that we patched things up years later and became the best of friends, and he became the greatest grandfather in the world. And we had many, many conversations about that.
So where in that, even I'm not letting it go.
Yeah.
Like where in there is forgiveness?
It took a long, long time. And because I'm an emotional cutter, I carried that for years. And it affected really every relationship after that, whether it was even just with friends or whether it was with girlfriends or a wife, or it affected everything. And it hurt so bad to even think about it that I didn't want to address it. And I went into therapy and in therapy, you can determine what you talk about. So if you want them to think you're getting better, you can
easily.
Yeah. So I got through therapy pretty easily at the time. Did you
want them to go deeper?
I didn't.
Yeah.
There was a part of me that just wanted it to be gone. But then, quite honestly, there was a part of me that wanted to hold on to it because I thought I could feed off of it, or that was the last time I really knew him, and that's all I had left of him, and I was holding on to that in some weird, perverse kind of way. But it wasn't until within the last 5 years, really, that I really let it go. I take that back. Prior to him, my brother, I can't remember what year, 2003 or something, got married, and that was kind of the impetus of us getting back together because we were in the same room. And we patched things up, and it took a while to really it took years for it to really kind of gel and for me to really trust him, because he had a way of, we both probably had a way, but he had a way of just going 2 steps forward and then 10 back. And I would just get bent out of shape because I didn't want to feel what I felt back then. And I would just go, we're done. And
protect yourself.
Yeah. But
we could go real deep on this. I want to keep us on relative.
Yeah. So you said, how do you, my answer to your question is you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror, which is hard, and say, can I get better? And if you can't even make the choice to look at yourself in the mirror, you're not there yet, right? So we've all been in relationships with people, and those people have been in relationships with us, I'm sure, at many times in our lives, that you have one person that wants to, that is capable of changing and wants to change and wants to improve, and the other person that's just for whatever reason. And I was that way for years of, I don't need to change because I'm, pissed off at this and this and this, and I don't want to admit that I have problems, and I don't want to admit that I can change. Until you can sit down and look yourself in the mirror and go, I can get better, let me figure out how, that's when your life changes.
Transforms, yeah. Because I'm listening to you say change, and I'm looking at your evolution here as a momentary transformation. Was there an actual point or experience or event that was like, all right, that's it, I'm now aware of what I did in the past and I can move on?
I think you have many of those, yeah, depending on what you need to work on.
And they keep adding? I
think it keeps going. I mean, I have one of those every day, especially being a parent. Every day, at the end of the day, I sit back, not intentionally, but something will always happen where I could handle that better.
Yeah.
Now, some parents, and I'm not...
Do you journal that at all?
I do.
Good.
Yeah.
On a daily basis?
When I'm in a good place, I do.
Good.
Journal every day.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But if you don't think that way, you won't improve.
And that's a way to improve. All right. So we talked about business. We got into relationships. I do want to touch on just concept of, and I know you said you were born with creativity, so to speak, and it's obviously been in you since you were, young, Star Wars, locking yourself in the room. Is there anything that you can provide for your listeners and me also, because it's an issue that I want to work with in stimulating creativity? Is there any tips that you can provide or tactics? Because you've seen it, and you've maybe seen employees or people who are like, hey, can I get as creative as you? And it's like, all right, it's just in me. Because there's a candle here and it smells really good. That helps me. Plus the candles. Picture and yeah.
This is what works for me.
That's why I'm listening to you.
I embrace my youth, That got me in trouble for a long time because I was so embracing my youth that I was actually embracing the bad decisions that I made in my youth and the way you think. So once you fix that and you start acting like an adult, making adult decisions, you can still hold on to your youth. I wear Vans.
I was just going to say
pretty much every day because that makes me feel youthful.
Yeah.
Right. If I don't have a client meeting, I'll wear this to work. If I have a client meeting, I'll dress it up a little bit.
Just a little though.
And I always go with it's the creative guy. He can get away with it.
Yeah.
But,
of course.
I try to be as youthful as possible.
So what's an adult decision versus a youthful decision? Help me out on that one.
Not eat the cookie out of the cookie jar when you know that you shouldn't eat that cookie.
because health is a priority.
Well, that cookie could be a lot of different things.
Yeah. Got it. Metaphorical cookie.
Metaphorical cookie.
Yes.
But embrace your youth. I love life too, we could be sitting, it's not going to happen today, but if this was a good day and I got my stuff together and we finished this, go out paddleboarding after this or go do something fun.
Well, and I run into you at the pool and one of the main reasons that I swim is because I play like a dolphin in the water. And like if I get burnt out from swimming lap after lap after lap, and sometimes I do that for just fitness and cardio, but I'm in there swimming underwater, holding my breath, doing flips underwater, just playing like a kid, and it helps me stay energized and youthful.
I try to do, and I just it's not a I'm trying to, it's just who I am. I should say I allow myself to. I take the kids to the arcades. I probably enjoy it more than they do.
There's like Dave and Buster's.
Dave and Buster's. Okay. We have a Castle laser tag around the corner from our house, nice. Or a Monster Golf or whatever. We'll get in the car and go to the beach and drive the 2 hours to get there, for them, all of us, just to
go
and
be. That's awesome. So random acts of fun.
Random acts of fun. Okay. Always remind yourself where you came from, because oftentimes when you were younger, that's when anything was possible. Yeah, that's when you didn't have all these limitations and bosses and telling you can't do this.
Self-judgment.
There's no self-judgment. It's like they tell you teach your kid how to ski when they're a kid, like 2 versus even 5, because they'll be more likely to go do it when they're 2 versus when they're 5. I don't want to fall and I want to do this, and they all of a sudden have concerns. So
all those fear monsters and the barking dog coming in.
So stay young is number 1 mentally.
Okay.
Number 2, when I was managing. I was in my early 30s when I was managing a group of people regionally in a production office, and they were in their mid 40s and 50s, and some of them were a little older than that. And they just were not motivated to do anything. They weren't motivated to improve themselves. They weren't motivated to go the extra mile. They weren't motivated to do the best that they could do. And I always looked at that and I thought, oof, I don't want to, why? I understand, even if you're retiring tomorrow, wouldn't you want to do your best job? Wouldn't you want to learn that new program? Wouldn't you want to read the magazine and pick up on new design techniques or new visuals? Or wouldn't you want to constantly improve?
There's something inside you and me, and which is why we get along, and the people that we know. There's a different, I think we can explore that further in part 2, 3, and 4 of this. It's a really... I don't know. I agree with you 100%. Like, how do you not want to do your best job in everything that you do? However, that's an adult decision, because when I was younger, you talked about working in somewhere for one day. I had a job at Red Lobster, and I didn't show up. I just didn't show up. I'm like, dude, how? I would never do that. And then
Not
I've had
even
it
for those cheese biscuits.
No. And I've had it done to me as an employer. Yeah, people, I hire them on Friday. They don't show up on Monday.
Are you more likely to be lenient on those guys or give them a pass because you did it?
No, definitely not. And however, I've had to reflect on myself. And say, all right, where was I off on communicating with you and thinking that we had a connection and that this was right? And this was years ago. I feel like I've got a much different place now when I'm interviewing and connecting and truly communicating with people.
Well, we also go in stages where you get stagnant, and I was in a stagnant mode we haven't gotten into this, but I was diagnosed with cancer 3 months ago. I didn't work a lot during those 3 months for various reasons. I mean, I worked, but it was just getting stuff done just to get it done. Get your life more. And it wasn't the cancer. You go through this period in your lives every once in a while where you've plateaued. You've done those techniques over and over again. You haven't energized yourself to look at anything else. So, the other day I downloaded a new editing program, and I'd never worked on it before. I started working on it just out of the box. It's the figurative box.
Yeah.
And
because you downloaded it.
Because I downloaded
no real
it.
Box.
No real box. And then all of a sudden I'm sitting there going, bam, I feel like a whole new world's opened up. Those little moments change everything.
So this is the other day. So we can talk we can hit on this topic too, because so 3 months ago you're diagnosed with kidney cancer, correct? And you've since had the kidney removed, and did you have chemotherapy as well?
No, the treatment was the removal of the kidney.
Okay. Yeah. So thank God you're still here. I'm glad you are safe and happy for your family and all that. What are your takeaways from this experience?
From the cancer?
Your life was on the line basically, right? So you said...
Could have been.
And did you hit that plateau at work before getting the diagnosis?
Oh, yeah. You hit that plateau all the time.
Okay.
That's the point. The last 5 years have been very interesting for me. The last 6 years. My wife and I separated. I went off and did my own thing, all the while of being a parent and seeing my kids every day. splitting time with my wife. But we would always do stuff together. People would look at it as just bizarre. But
I've had that.
Yeah,
I had that look on my face when we talked about it. Yeah, I've had that look on my face too.
And then my dad, had cancer, lung cancer. And then he lived with us for months and watched him go through that. And it's been an interesting 5-6 years where it forced me to start thinking like an adult, and it forced me to start thinking about future. And I didn't really want to think about the future. I was really more invested in living in today. I didn't want to think about the future because that means a lot of implications with, you got to deal with death, and you got to deal with this and that and whatever, and the realities of the world. So for me, in going back to that emotional cutting, it was easier for me to bury my head and ignore everything than to deal with reality. So I wouldn't have changed one thing over the last 5-6 years because it's gotten me to where I'm going now, or where I am now. And then tomorrow I'm going to be somewhere else. And my whole point is, every day when you look at somebody like a Tom Brady, he's some say he's the best quarterback ever, right? Is he still the best quarterback ever because he lost the Super Bowl a couple months ago?
He's got 2 supermodels and 5 Super Bowl rings, so I'm putting him like on the pedestal up here.
Well, sure,
yeah.
but does that mean after he threw an interception, is he not?
Yes, he's still potentially the best quarterback ever.
We live in a society, and individually as well, where we are so judgmental towards people, or we put them in boxes
as soon as they do something wrong.
Yeah. And we look at people and think, well, he had a bad, he's in that rut. Or if I say, yeah, of course you got to go follow your dreams. Well, people assume I do that all the time. Well, no, I fail every day. And I am a flawed human being every single day. I do things I don't want to do. I say things I don't want to say. I don't do the things that I want to do. But it's every day making the choice to fight back and to try to accomplish, to do the opposite and try to make yourself better. And it goes back to that whole mirror thing. But what did I learn going through cancer? I kind of learned that.
Yeah.
I learned that anything could be taken away from you. What I also learned very, very greatly is that in thinking and talking that way, you're not really allowed to bring up faith in modern society, really, unless you win a Super Bowl, unless you win an Oscar or a Grammy, and unless you say, and I'm not taking anything away from the people that say I want to thank God. That's very well as a genuine response from the recipient of that award. But society has deemed that it's really the only times that you're allowed to talk about that kind of stuff, and
except on a podcast.
Well, going through this cancer, I realized that, again, faith to me is a journey that, just like any relation, it's a relationship. I look at it as a relationship.
With God?
With God. And there's going to be days where you don't want to talk to your best friend, and there's going to be days where you don't like your kids sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's okay. But it's kind of like taking that, I've never really addressed my faith publicly because I'm flawed, and I didn't want anyone to ever look at me and say, well, that's what a typical Christian's like, or that's what I just heard him use the F-bomb yesterday and this and that, and he failed this and that and whatever. And then going through this cancer thing, I realized, you know what, screw that. This is a journey, and just like Tom Brady, you can have faith and you can fail. And that doesn't take anything away from you because of the very nature of your faith.
Yeah.
So
it's returning back to that lack of judgment of yourself, that place where, I see it as, I equate it to like learning in Buddhist meditation, where, people are like, how do you meditate and just zone out all the time? Don't you think? Yeah. Your brain goes into random thoughts all the time, but it's the return. Yeah. It's being able to return to presence and return to love, return to God.
So I learned, I know, that without my faith, I wouldn't have gotten through that cancer. I would have been a mental nightmare without my faith. So why wouldn't I talk about that? you know? And I mentioned this on my last podcast with my brother. So the last podcast episode, gosh, I can't remember what it was, but me coming back, I haven't been on social media since I got cancer. I haven't done a podcast since I got cancer. I've gotten off because I had to, get my life in order.
Yeah. Understandable.
And I wanted to come back. And one of the first things I thought of, literally in the hospital, and I covered this in the podcast, was, why did this happen? Not, God, why did you do this to me? But why did this happen? What am I supposed to learn from this? And I had talked to you. I was practically deaf in November and December prior to my diagnosis with inner ear things. We got into a hellacious car accident that could have gone really wrong, fraction of a second off. And I believe just God was tapping my shoulder going, you need to listen to me right now. And this was that, all right, I'm going to get your attention really. So my whole point of this was, if I feel this, and if you're my friend and you want to ask what's going on, why would I feel nervous about telling you anything? You know what I mean? Or why would I feel nervous about talking about my faith? Or I don't feel nervous about talking about that Van Halen guitar on the wall. Because it means something to me. Well, this means something to me. So that was one big thing coming out of the cancer of, I'm taking the reins off of my life. If I want to talk about my faith, I'll talk about my faith. Yeah. If I want to talk about, my flaws, I'm going to talk about my flaws. If I want to tell you how happy I am about X, Y, Z, I'm going to do that. So that was really kind of the big thing I took away from the cancer was, live your life. Because you were born for very particular reasons, and you're unlike anybody else. And that means you have things to give that no one else can give. And I never really embraced that, and if I did, I kind of held on to it and didn't, let it out there. And
this is your medium. That's awesome. I'm glad. So this all came on. So what's next for Making Waves and the Blue Wave and Tom? Right now.
Yeah, that's a big question.
I was supposed to do a more specific question, like the Billboard question. Want to do that one instead?
Yeah, what's the Billboard question?
Like if you could put something on a billboard for millions, billions of people to spread your message and send it out there, what would you put up there?
I'm a big fan of dreams. I would tell people to follow your dreams, and that sounds so cliche. It should be go get your dreams, not follow them, because that's kind of apathetic. You're just on this course, kind of like, okay, where's it going? No, you determine where it's going.
I love it.
You go get it.
Go get your dreams.
Yeah. The next step of what I just said, which was I'm unleashing it. When I decided to do that, I had more and more situations just kind of pop up and put in my lap of where I could be of service to people. I had a colleague that I'm not very close with, and I saw on social media he was having a problem with his kid, newborn. And then another person that I haven't talked to, I went to high school with 30 years, haven't talked to him. But it allowed me to reach out to him out of the blue and say, hey, listen, I understand, and I think we should all do more of this, but it gave me a perspective. And the billboard that I gave them was, hey, listen, I know you're going through some hard times, but I promise you, if you just pray, things are going to turn out right. And even if it doesn't turn out right on paper, let's say bad things happen. It happened for a reason. And just start praying about what that reason was. I got cancer. So people say, well, that was a bad thing. God wasn't looking out for you. I'm thrilled I got cancer. I really, really am. And on paper, it's a bad thing. But it opened me up to looking at things differently. It opened me up to, okay, well, what's really going on here? The life has really been about Tom. Life really shouldn't be about Tom. It should be about serving other people, and it should be about helping other people, and it should be about, how can you be of service, and then following your dreams and stuff like that. But
or getting your dreams.
Or getting your, sorry, there we go again. Getting your dreams.
We need to get a sticker up here.
I know.
Yeah.
We put it on the wall in decal.
Well, I think this is a good spot to wrap us up for my first podcast that I've done. So I want to take a second.
You've done great.
Thanks, man. Well, it hasn't been edited yet, but
I don't edit these things.
Really?
No.
Oh, now I'm scared, people. So I want to just take a second to thank you and tell you that I appreciate you as a man and as a friend. And it's awesome to have a friend who, like, our conversations are never about the weather or, they're sometimes about business, but we tend to always get into much deeper shit. And I think this is just the beginning, man. So
that's interesting you say that, because I mentioned this in my podcast with my brother. And I wanted to come back and reboot the podcast, but also let everyone know what's been going on with me and to come back, basically. It was my comeback podcast. But it was my comeback just in general.
Well, you're transformative. You're a different person now.
Yeah. And so I didn't want to sit here just by myself and talk about it. I wanted someone to bounce off ideas. So this is actually great to do. But out of anybody, I wanted my brother here because he's my brother.
Yeah.
But I did tell him at the end of that, what's really interesting is that coming out of the cancer and being cured and all that stuff, there is still just journeys you still got to go through. It's a fight to stay out of normalcy because you desperately want your life to be back to normal. So you find yourself starting to do the same things that you used to do, whether it's diet or whether it's, let's say procrastination or, one of the other things that you need to work on. And it's a constant battle to do that. But the other thing to fight against that, because that sense of urgency that you do have when you have cancer, there's something safe about that. Even though you have cancer, I felt more alive because you're on the edge of life and death. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it wasn't that dire in my particular situation. They caught it early and everything was fine, but you still were told.
It's still cancer, man.
You were still cancer. You were still told by yourself in a room with a doctor a foot away from you, you have cancer. And still, I got to live the rest of my life wondering, is it going to be somewhere else? I got to get checked every 3 months, 6 months for certainly the next 5 years. But the thing that I found still that is bizarre to me, and the podcast, and I did a little video to introduce it that it will go up. Hopefully we'll fix this. Because I haven't been on social media, because I haven't made it public, people will come up to me like you and say, I hit you out of the blue with it because we were talking about doing business and I wanted to say, hey, before we schedule anything, you need to know this because I'm going to be gone for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I've had normal conversations with people after that going, hey, so what's been up with you? Well, I'm thinking in my head, what's been up with me? I've been fighting cancer.
I just got a kidney removed because I had cancer.
So do I not say that?
Heck yeah.
Yeah, like I sat there the first time. It's funny. I was asked by a friend, and I sat there, and I hadn't seen him in a while, and it might have been 20 seconds of silence because I'm sitting there going, I don't know what to tell you. And then finally I was just like, you know what? If you are my friend and you want to know what's been going on with me, this is what's been going on with me. So why wouldn't I not tell you? If I had just won the Oscar last week, wouldn't I tell you that?
Yeah.
So I didn't want it to be self-serving. I didn't want to bum them out because it's nothing to be bummed out about. And I don't feel. So I would just let it out there. And then when I realized, because I'm so okay with it, I would just say, like, I would deliver that message like I would deliver I had a cheeseburger for lunch.
Right.
It didn't mean anything to me. That put people.
I was going to say, like, what are the reactions?
They were taken aback.
Yeah.
And the majority of them, like, I don't like.
I'm uncomfortable.
I'm sure it made them uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, they'd always come back to me and say what I was uncomfortable with was how comfortable you were with it.
Yeah.
And once I realized you were okay with it, not even that you were okay, but just you were okay with this conversation, it calmed them down. But I just thought I needed to address that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I think I would love to maybe a couple months from now see where you've gone from a, emotional standpoint, spiritual standpoint, and a health standpoint, because those are things that all people listening want to know is like, okay, what do you do after this? What's next?
Yeah.
What are the transformative realizations from a spiritual perspective, or what are you doing? We could go on for hours.
Well,
on this.
I think that excites me. In the last podcast that I did, coming back, I actually said, and I've been kicking myself ever since, I said, this is not a faith podcast. This is not a Christian podcast. This is not a this podcast or this podcast. This is not a cancer podcast. This is not a this.
It's about making waves, man.
I realized when I was home that it's what I said, I fell into what society wants to deliver to us. We got to put it in a box. This is this kind of podcast. He said something about God, so now it's a Christian podcast, or he said something about cancer, so it's this podcast, or now it's a creativity podcast because you brought up that word. This is a life podcast.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to talk about basketball for an episode, this isn't a basketball podcast. This is just a life podcast. It's whatever anyone wants to talk about is what we'll talk about now. And that's how I'm addressing my life from now on.
Awesome.
I'm not this and I'm not that and I'm not this. I'm Tom.
Right on.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming in and doing this.
All right.
All right, cool. We'll knuckles.
Yes.